All right, everyone, the Duluth School District has decided to ban Huckleberry Finn and To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, first and foremost, it's very funny when schools are trying to ban books because you'd think that their primary concern would be illiteracy. Like, hey, little Jimmy is reading a year behind his level, we should do something about it. Why then would you want to ban any book? You should be encouraging people to read more. There shouldn't be any piece of literature that's banned. Absolutely not. Call me when you go after the Communist Manifesto. I bet I'll wait 1,000 years. But the NAACP up there is applauding this, which shows that they don't give a fuck about like inner city school kids or anything. You'd think, wouldn't it be more worth their time to encourage reading and fundraise to buy like more and better books and get people into like, hey, here's a fucking after-school book club, read more. And diversifying the kind of literature that they're reading as opposed to trying to ban things. Now that would make sense if the NAACP up there actually cared about colored people, which is itself the funniest outdated reference and moniker you could have for such a group. It's like hilarious to me. It's because if you were to use that term, you'd be called a racist. But the NAACP proudly carries it on a banner for some odd reason. They might want to change their name at some point. But think about how funny it is. They'll ignore illiteracy. They'll ignore the problem of actual racial injustice as it happens. Like, someone walks down the street and shouting racial slurs and attacking minorities. That incenses them less, gets less airplay than oh, Huckleberry Finn. 100-year-old book says the N-word. Oh no. And by the way, it's funny to me still that you almost have to self-censor. You can't even, for the purposes of criticism, use that word. Otherwise you get flagged into limited state. The NAACP, meanwhile, they'll say it all the time, as do their favorite musicians. I wonder why there's a problem in some cases with literacy in some of these schools. I wonder why that could possibly be. Could it be the NAACP comes in and holds people back in order to get more funding? They don't want people to the NAACP wouldn't exist if those schools were functioning properly. There'd be no one for them to harangue to. No, so instead they have to complain about some fucking book 100 years ago. And To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird is like Racial Justice Manifesto 101. That has nothing, the context in which that sort of slang at the time is used is in the context of mocking racism. So to have To Kill a Mockingbird gets banned. The NAACP's head there comes and says, oh, this is overdue for 20 years. Good, we're getting it out of our school. You sound a lot like people who put freedom fries on their menu back after 9/11. You sound a lot like the doofuses who were saying we need to ban the Dixie Chicks. Anything critical of Christian evangelical culture is devil worship, like when they went after Harry Potter. I can remember a time when they were trying to ban Harry Potter in schools. Oh, it was something, it was an awesome sight to behold, to see so many school districts with so many concerned parents trying to do this. And they all for the most part, resisted it. Even in red districts, they were like, come on. Yeah, okay, the book talks about witchcraft. Kids are reading, kids are enjoying it. You should be happy that your kid likes reading finally. Maybe we can give them recommendations of other similar literature. They can go off and read that too, and they'll do better in school. They'll be smarter, they'll be more literate. It's a good thing for the world. No shit, of course it is. Anyone who wants to burn or ban books is an enemy of academics. They're an enemy of your mind, they're an enemy of mankind. Now, we should reject and rebuke groups that do such things. It doesn't matter, by the way, what their political affiliation is. If someone were to say, well, we need to get the Communist Manifesto out of our libraries, I would say no, and I would condemn the attempt to do so. You don't have to like the literature, but it's still literature. It should be beyond censorship. No book should be censored, no matter what it contains. I don't care how objectionable it is. There are all sorts of objectionable books out there. There's books on porn and stuff like that. Who fucking cares? Look, if you're offended by something, don't read it. It's the same thing that we should be using online. That should be the threshold. If you don't like the video, turn it off. There's a famous song by Cheap Sex called I Got Raped by the FCC, and that's basically the final line is if you're offended, turn it off. Yeah, wonderful way to look at the world. Wouldn't it be so lovely if people could speak, and if they're saying something that's totally objectionable and off the wall, generally people just won't listen to it. Wow, see how that works? It's wonderful. It's almost like people have a choice in what they absorb. You don't have to pick up. The fact that Huckleberry Finn is in your school library doesn't mean you have to read it. And by the way, I'm not seeing any kids offended at these books. Never were. It's like when the teacher, when I was in high school, I think it was 10th grade English. It's talking about like, book censorship and offensive material, and we were reading Huckleberry Finn at the time. Nobody in the fucking class was offended at it. Unless the teacher brings it up, nobody's even thinking about it. They either like the book and they're like, oh, it's pretty cool, or they don't like the book and they're like, oh, another boring book I have to fucking read for this English class. And most of the books fall into the latter. Look, I would think that if there's one kid who can be saved from that doldrum by reading something like Huckleberry Finn and doesn't lose their taste for reading altogether, I would say let him read it. And by the way, it's not going to effectively censor anything. It's like you can get all these books online anyway. What I would say is the students there, in solidarity with, I know this will sound strange to a lot of high school students, in solidarity with their ability to learn, they should all just get copies of Huckleberry Finn and To Kill a Mockingbird, bring him to school anyway, and start like a lunchtime book club. Trust me, when people become aware that that's happening, it can get you on the news, and then you can sort of speak out against this bullshit that goes on. That would be funny. Be fun. You can rebuke the NAACP. Yes, by the way, that includes those of you who are black. You can call them out for what they are. They're opportunists. It's like Al Sharpton. Oh, I care so much about these communities. No, he doesn't. He doesn't even live in their communities. He lives in his fucking penthouse. What the fuck is he doing for anybody other than trying to make money off of Jesse Jackson, who sues people constantly for discrimination that doesn't even exist and then pretends like he's doing something good for the little people of some minority community. Really, he's just fucking filling his own fucking pockets. That's all he does. So when I see that a school district, think, this is a place that's supposed to educate people, help them learn and show them, hey, here's some books, they're cool, you should read them, you should be literate. Schools banning literature is probably the funniest form of paradox you can think of. Just like the NAACP, it's like, oh, we want to advance the black community. Okay, we're going to ban books so that the problem of low educational attainment in this inner city school district gets worse. That makes a lot of sense. We're really standing up for people. No, you're not. You're holding them back, which is exactly what you want, so you can keep making money. Because if there's no problem for you to address, you wouldn't even exist. Nobody would give you free money. And so your heads, the people that make six-figure salaries as part of the heads of the NAACP, they wouldn't have a job. They'd actually have to do something worthwhile for a change, instead of complaining about non-existent problems while ignoring existent ones. That's the real problem. Now, anyone who burns or bans books is an enemy. Certainly my enemy, certainly should be considered the enemy of every thinking, rational, sane individual. Unfortunately, because of the political climate, there will be some people who say, well, yeah, that's true. These old books written by white people need to go. We need more African poetry or something. Why don't you have both? That would be a novel idea. It doesn't boil down to an either-or situation. Just read. And your kids in school, I would think the parents pretending to be outraged over Huckleberry Finn having the N-word a couple times. Why don't you get more outraged about the fact that your kid could have higher educational attainment? Why don't you complain about that? Never happens. Never happens. It's like some hayseed community with you've got the one room schoolhouse. They don't even have like half the classes that they should have. They're like, total, it's like bare floor sort of schooling going on in some really rural, ultra white meth community. And they're like, they get all upset over Harry Potter. Well, it's going to turn my kids into witches. Well, maybe you should be afraid that your kid is simply going to be ignorant for the rest of their life. But you didn't think of that one now, did you? That's about all. Peace out.